Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the rescheduled City Council meeting for the City of Urbana. It's Monday, February 23rd, 2025. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu? Here. Councilmember Evans?
Here.
Councilmember Hersey?
Here.
Councilmember Colasetti? Here. Councilmember Bishop?
Here.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Here.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Here.
Mayor Marlin?
Here. Next item is approval of minutes from the previous meeting of December 9th, 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Are there any substantial changes? Okay. Will all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? We don't have any for this particular meeting. I will make a note that this meeting is rescheduled from last week, and this will be followed immediately by the regular Committee of the Whole meeting. So there's 2 meetings tonight. We'll move on to presentations and public input. I'll do the presentation first. We have scheduled for the DREAAMers trip to Malawi. I'd like to welcome Tracy Dace, and is a representative from Sister Cities as well. Looks like it's Scott Dace. Your presentation should be ready to go on the laptop.
I'm not going to get in the way for long. Hello, my name is Scott Dace. Been with the Urbana Sister Cities Committee since day 2, probably not day 1. 10 plus years, I think 08 is when we got started. I want to introduce Tracy Dace, who is our longtime partner and who's been doing some really good work with our Sister Cities partnerships in Malawi, which is in southeastern Africa. Tracy?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Is your microphone on, Tracy? You might need to pull it a little bit closer. Green light.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Scott, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to share our experience in Malawi. We were there last summer, and I still have goosebumps from being there and just also having the opportunity to be with our DREAAMers there. Today we're just going to share about those experiences, but I would like to start by sharing about DREAAM in case some of you may not know a lot about the organization. I'm the founder of DREAAM. DREAAM has been here since 2015. We're about to celebrate our 10th anniversary this summer, so it's very exciting. 501c3 nonprofit community impact organization, reaching and supporting and loving on children in Champaign, Rantoul, and also Urbana. We've had Urbana families in DREAAM from day 1. Families drive over to Champaign to be a part of our programs. We impact youth starting at the age of 3 and stay in their lives until the age of 24. We do a wide range of out-of-school programs, reaching over 400 students per year. Parent support, college and career pathways, as well as other interesting ways to impact DREAAMers. We do a lot of exposure experiences. So one of the biggest ones that we have been able to accomplish is taking 5 of our youth and our boys to Malawi, Africa, for international opportunity to do service, but also to gain more understanding about global affairs and cultural importance. We had 5 DREAAMers. 3 were from Champaign schools, but we had 2 of our DREAAMers that were from Urbana schools that traveled with us. And we have Michael Turner here to represent the DREAAMers, and Marquand Dunn, who is a sophomore at Urbana High School, has been in DREAAM since he was like 3rd grade. So I just want to talk briefly about the purpose of the trip to Malawi. One, we're working in partnership with the Urbana Sister Cities Committee to extend that community engagement work over there. We want to strengthen partnerships with local organizations and communities in Malawi, particularly communities that's doing similar work to what we do here at DREAM. Engage with youth through educational and cultural exchange programs, explore opportunities for collaboration and future projects. And also, this allows our young people here to gain more insights about local challenges and how they can be change agents, right, here in our local community. So it definitely has impacted their leadership abilities. And again, we just want to promote cultural understanding and global awareness among DREAMers, which then also impacts their families as well. So I'm going to stop here and let the most important person speak about the good work and the experiences he had at DREAM.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Turner. I am a senior at Urbana High School. It's great to see everyone on this nice day, beautiful outside, and it's great to be able to be a part of this beautiful presentation from a beautiful trip. Going into it, when I saw Mr. Tracy's message, my mom is like, "Oh, you going to Africa, boy?" But the first thought I was like, "Mom, I don't know about the food." But we got there, and I will tell you, I've never had the best homemade food like Malawi homemade food. Their hospitality and their just, how welcoming they were as people, it was beautiful to see. And it's something that I would love to see more in our community. You may not know somebody, but they still treat you as your brother, as your sister. So being able to meet with different community leaders, through Mr. Tracy, we were able to meet with a lady who founded multiple universities, and it was great to see how her vision came to life, and it may look different based off of their location, but the impact and the purpose is still similar. So that was a great experience to see. And connecting with young people. Mr. Tracy entrusted me as the trip captain to work on our STEM camp. So we taught around 40 plus students each session about solar energy, and they were excited to see how we use it, and it was fascinating to me to see their innovations, things we have here that we use on a daily basis. They're innovating there. One student has showed us an AC unit made out of paper and water. It was amazing to see, but I was able to see how, the wonders of the brain, it may look different no matter where we're at, but it's still fascinating. And that was again, thanks to Mr. Tracy in this amazing trip. A lot of things we got to see, the greenery, how beautiful Malawi was, and bring it back here. It was just amazing. I'm still thinking about the safari, the water, even though, Mr. Tracy, we don't do the water. But it was just a beautiful scene, beautiful people, an amazing trip. I'll say going to, the churches, I've never seen a church so filled with so many young people dedicated to teaching other people about their faith, and so involved in their faith. They had, younger pastors, younger leaders that were actually running the services and actually excited to share with us the things that they've been doing, their outreach activities, and how we could, partner with them, support them, how they could support us. A lot of them were like, "Oh, we coming over there to see where y'all are." And just those conversations, right? Because it's easy to build misconceptions based off of what we think is true unless you actually sit down and talk with the people that are in those experiences. And I will tell you, after that trip, my definition of struggle really changed, because struggle to us is completely different to struggle to them. And it was just, learning experience, and it was so much that I brought back home, so I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. Painting the house, when he said I'll be painting the house, I was like, am I going to have help? Because it's something that my mama would never let me do. But it was an amazing thing to be able to be part of, building a home, not a house, but just a home for people in that community. And again, they're so appreciative, so grateful. We got so many hugs, so much, things to bring back home from them. Going into it, one of the presenters that talked to us, they said that Malawian people, they will give you their last because you need it. They'll give you your coat, their coat, whatever, and it was true. And so it was just so beautiful to see that. Ms. Cornisha got to do her girl empowerment, which was great. You know, just their dedication to learning was beautiful. Education is one of their pillars of their communities, and it was just amazing to see that in person. You know, it's great to see one thing in a textbook or on TikTok, YouTube, but to see it in person is transformative, right? And so it is through DREAM and visionary leaders such as Mr. Tracy Dace that these opportunities become available for students like me, because a 17-year-old boy, black boy from Urbana at the time, never thought that I would be eating with the senior advisor to the president of Malawi. But you know, when you hang with this guy, you don't know who you'll meet. And so I'm very thankful for your support of DREAM. I'm very thankful for DREAM, and I'm very thankful for Mr. Tracy and his amazing involvement and leadership of DREAM. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. So Michael is one youth that was impacted, and like I said, there were 5. So we are going back in August to return to Malawi, and the plan is to take at least 10 of our young people from this community. At least 4 of those 10 will be Urbana high school students. We are partnering here locally with Habitat for Humanity to do some service in this community, but when we go back to Malawi, we are doing a build in Malawi to build a home there for a family. And we'll continue to do work around girl empowerment. We plan to adopt a school. The safari was an amazing, life-changing experience, so we'll do that. And also do some other work around youth talent. There's some really bright students there, very, very smart, but also very gifted in many different ways. So we'll go back and support them. So we thank you for your time, and if there are any questions.
Yeah, we have time for a couple questions, if anyone has one. Grace.
I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation and the work that you're doing. And question that can be somewhat rhetorical too is just how Urbana can further support DREAM in your efforts. I don't know if you have any answer off the top of your hand, and also feel free to remember some of our continued grant programs and other ways we can support.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely we plan to apply for some of the grant programs that are available. We have been funded in the past for grants through Urbana. And so we definitely want to increase our impact and our reach in the Urbana community. And so I just encourage families to follow us on Facebook. We have parenting programs called the Parent School. We have a Saturday school where we're teaching young black children about black history and cultural pride, really pouring into them as a young person. So we just have a lot to offer the community, and we definitely want to offer more of these programs and services to Urbana because we are doing it in other communities.
Thank you. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to public input. If anyone wants just to address the Urbana City Council for the council meeting, please step up to the mic.
Good evening, my name is Brian Dolliner. I live at 303 West Locust in Urbana. I'm here to again speak about the ordinance for police surveillance that's being proposed. Wearing my journalist cap, I interviewed a couple workers this week who reported and shared the story of ICE in our community who arrested an individual last week on Monday. Talk to me offline if you want more details, because it's incited a lot of fear, obviously, in the community. And for this is another reason why we need to be aware of the kind of technologies we're bringing in the community. I was one of 3 people to advance a sanctuary ordinance in Urbana just a few years ago. One of those other individuals was Francis Boyle, who I'm sad to say recently passed away. Francis Boyle, professor in law and human rights at the University of Illinois, who passed the original sanctuary ordinance in Urbana in the 1980s. So much credit to Francis Boyle. I read in the New York Times this last week, Celebrite, which we've been raising concerns about, Celebrite, Urbana has some $9,000 that's been contracted for Celebrite services. Celebrite, who's based in Israel and produces technology for hacking cell phones. And among various human rights abuses that have been documented by Amnesty International, according to the New York Times article that just appeared in the last week, $54 million in contracts with ICE have been signed with Celebrite. So I just want to again address how important it is that we are looking into the police technologies that are coming across our desks and give them some consideration, some chance for public input and considering when using these technologies, and some level of transparency. In this case, Urbana, a sanctuary city, is funding a company that is also powering Trump's mass deportations. So it's a reason we should be looking into these kind of things. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Stephen McGuire. I want to, I've read the ordinance proposed, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Chief Boone himself has been quoted supporting transparency, and I think that's transparency. However, we need checks and balances. And if this technology, which at one point I should correct one of the city council who at a previous meeting said that you needed to hear from the people this impacts most. This is not the police. We are the ones who, if any of these technologies wrongfully, because facial recognition technologies, image recognition is somewhat flawed. A number of years ago, the best image recognition software could be convinced that a horse was a frog by changing 1 pixel. It was known as the 1 pixel attack. If one of us is wrongfully flagged by one of these image recognition softwares as being a perpetrator of a crime, we go to jail, not Chief Boone or his officers. And as a result, it's important that if this technology is needed, which Chief Boone and many say it is, that City Council have the oversight that this bill proposes. What Mr. Dolinar has raised when talking about the fear in the immigrant community is valid. Mass deportations are happening. And what's worse, a lot of U.S. citizens are wrongfully being captured by ICE. This is all the more reason why we need oversight of these technologies. Because if those technologies wrongfully flag someone down, then if you know how image recognition neural networks work, it's by feeding these networks a bunch of images, and then various weights on each pixel of the image and each attribute are recalibrated so it can be more accurate. However, the problem is that that if someone were to take a picture of me and then to take something which is a complete scatter shot of colored blips, the image recognition might think that that complete scatter shot was 100% a picture of me. These technologies are not infallible. That's why we need oversight. Finally, as someone who has been horrified by the genocide that is temporarily on hold, but there have already been news stories about Israel violating the ceasefire, we need to divest from all companies investing in Israel until it complies with international law. That includes Celebrite. So if that means that whatever services Celebrite or its cohorts are providing the UPD, there should be another company that provides those services. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Christopher Zelli. I'm a resident of the Champaign-Urbana community since the 90s. I'm here today because I'm deeply afraid that this ordinance doesn't go far enough. There's some goodwill that the police department would be engaging in good faith through data-driven, hygienic processes that are transparent and accountable, which we've seen no track record of since Boone entered office. He's deeply allergic to presenting things with data or to being accountable to positions that are not data-driven. And checks and balances really rely on that good faith relationship that has clearly not been established in his tenure. Moving forward with this program would require them to have data-driven arguments for the implementation of these programs. And whether it was his initial city council meeting here or recently during the budget presentations, I think we can see a clear track record where they eschew data in their presentations. Contrasting the fire's budget to the police's budget would be a clear example if anybody wanted to look back on record. So I have some deep concerns that the party we're working with here is not in good faith and wouldn't be engaging representation of these programs in a way where the auditing them would be minimal, where transparency would, where a small amount of transparency and a small amount of auditing really relies on the faith that the other person's gonna engage properly every time you're not watching. So I'd really want some kind of recourse for not providing data-driven arguments that discourages the police department or the chief from continuing to behave this way. Speaking of facial recognition software, it's been incredibly well documented that it's passable at detecting white faces and quite terrible at detecting anybody that's not white with any level of accuracy. So if we want a spy system that specifically misidentifies any of our colored residents, I think the people advocating for that should have the courage to say that's their goal. And then as far as hygienic investments and hygienic contracting, working with a company engaged in human rights violations, working that's incorporated in a country that is condemned by the criminal court for crimes against humanity, which is a very short list of about 3 countries, should not be businesses or entities that we give money to. And Celebrite clearly falls in that category, and it would be deeply unethical for you to continue doing business with them.
Hi, City Council. My name is Camille Cobb. I'm a resident of Champaign, and I'm a faculty member at the university. I study computer security and privacy issues. I'm here to speak in favor of this resolution. It was authored in conjunction with a person who has deep expertise on this topic, and it's a good idea. If anything, it's a little disappointing that all we're talking about is transparency, and it's still up in the air about whether this is something that we're in favor of. Because honestly, like, so many of these, as people are arguing, surveillance technologies are deeply troubling. And just, I don't want to live in a world where we have so much surveillance. It's enabling so much of the bad that's happening in the world this minute. And so, like, this feels in some ways like seeding that we're going to end up having like tons and tons of times where we repeatedly have to convince city council or try to convince you all that each individual one of these surveillance technologies is problematic and why. But at least having the opportunity to do that is a bare minimum that you should be helping us have. So I'm in favor of that resolution. Once it's through, which I hope you all vote in favor of it. I'm not in favor of any of the surveillance technologies, but looking forward to conversations about that going forward. Thanks.
Does anyone here in the room wish to address the council? Okay, I think we got some public in.
I would like to address the council.
Okay. We'll bring the mic to you.
Good evening, council, the mayor and council. I have spoken with many people, and let me just name a few. Lawyers, activists, regular Joe Blow, Pookie, Ray Ray, Long Tall Sally, and Grandma Susie. There's a representation of people in this community. Why aren't they here? And why aren't they letting you know as the council that the buck should stop with you? Yes, we need to collaborate, yes, but the buck stop with the people we elect. That's what people want. So what they have brought forth, the two council persons, a lot of people are for that. But I can recall, what is it, 80s or 90s, when Mr. Jacobson was on the city council, and we were talking about not surveillance, but other things related to the police. He was appalled when I made a presentation about people being fearful and being targeted. And just like when I talked to my council person, she said, that was a long time ago. I said, no, it's now. And I meant to say it at the last meeting, but I talked too long about something else. But I'm going to say it now. You will be targeted, and people are afraid to come forth and speak. I don't know if the lawyers are afraid that they might not get clients. I don't know. They would have to tell you this. Ray Ray and Pookie might think that they might be targeted. We upstanding citizens have come and spoke to this council, and we targeted. Yes, I am. So I want Ms. Hersey to know that I'm saying this here. I'm not only telling her, I'm saying it publicly. And if I have been targeted many times before by the police. When I was president of the Ministerial Alliance of Champaign, Urbana, and vicinity. Urbana and Champaign police, I haven't been anywhere else. Yeah, I did go to France with the Sister City program, but most of it's here. Now, I'm not saying we don't have some good policemen. So a lot of people in my family are that, and we love them. However, what we need to do is ensure that our elected officials, the buck stop with you. And then if we don't like what you do, then we elect someone else. But we the people better stand up. And I hope some of the people that I've been talking to will finally come to the meeting and let you know what they feel. And I didn't finish my thought about Jacobson. He's gone away from this planet now. But he came to this meeting, and you can look at the record, and said, what I had said, he had researched and found out it was true. But I knew it was true because I had talked to many people. Still am. I might be talking a little loud. I've got hearing aids, and I don't know, sometimes they kind of mess up. But anyway, those are my comments. Checks and balances, what people are talking about. We've got to have that, especially given the administration we have now in Washington, D.C., and what's going on now. We need our elected officials to be accountable to us, not staff. Staff are not accountable to us. It's the elected officials, the people we elect. And lastly, oversight. It's a must. I almost said the blood of Jesus, but I have to say that because that's what I feel. Take this. Somebody take this. Oh, take this.
Were you done?
I'm done.
Does anyone else in the room wish to address the council? Okay, we'll move on to messages that have been asked to be read aloud. Who has those?
I believe those are for an item of business that's on the committee of the whole agenda. So Grace Wilkin will be chairing that meeting, so she
okay.
has those.
Great, thank you. All right. Move to council input and communication. Does anyone wish to share? Grace.
Thanks. Thank you for those of you who've come out tonight and watching and for your input. Did just want to try and articulate acknowledgements of the changes that are happening on a national level that are having impacts on everyone, I think, personally and professionally in various ways. I've been finding some comfort in our local community with human and trans rights demonstrations this weekend, and by a lot of organizations that we have in the community that support our very diverse community members and those who are feeling most vulnerable and afraid right now. Urbana Human Rights Ordinance is something really important in Urbana that overreaches state and federal human rights at the time, and even some still currently, I think. I've heard that our police department made a statement reaffirming our non-discrimination and human rights, and I find that encouraging and am encouraged by that. I've also heard some requests from diverse stakeholders throughout our community and our city wanting the city of Urbana to reaffirm our commitment to human rights and being a sanctuary city and protecting all of our residents and visitors. I'm totally on board with this idea. I'm willing to help draft a resolution, and I'm happy to have collaboration. So if anyone of the public, council, or within the city wants to help collaborate, please feel free to reach out. I think the emails may have changed. They're online, but I think mine's gwilkin@urbanail.gov or grace.wilkin@urbanail.gov. I think maybe both get you there, but check the website as well. But I'm happy to hear from folks and work on that, and just wanted to take a minute to try and articulate all that's going on. Thank you.
Any other updates from council? James.
Yeah, I want to address something that's happened in our community recently. We have a city leader in our neighboring city of Champaign who has taken it upon themselves to bring anti-Semitic comments to their city council and to post images that are alerting people, making people concerned for their safety because they have a meaning. This person has tried to explain themselves but hasn't done it very good and very well. But they do continue to bring things to the public view that creates fear in a segment of our community and are part of the language of hate. And hate has no home here, and it should stop. One of the things that is broken about the laws of this state is our members of our public, like Dr. Underwood has said, members of our public can't hold a local city council member or a mayor accountable when they go off the rails and when they start doing things that are unacceptable for their community. There is no recall option in the state of Illinois unless a particular municipality adopts that rule. There are individuals who are trying to make that available. Although those individuals are people I don't necessarily agree with on other things, I do think each community should have the opportunity to require a elected official to step down if enough of the people sign a petition and in a recall election chooses to replace them. So I have heard from members of our community who have been negatively affected by this, and I hear them and I see them, and I think it should stop.
Chris.
Thursday, January 23rd, I attended a musical concert at the middle school, Urbana Middle School, and there were three, there was an orchestra, a choir, and another ensemble. Hundreds of students, all had musical instruments, and they did a wonderful job. And I bring it up because as I watched the concert and listened to the wonderful music, this is the majority of what's going on in Urbana, and this is the majority of what our young people are about. Training and skill, developing skills, and it was just a tremendous display of our youth, and I just want to acknowledge that. I wish I could read all their names tonight, but I won't do that. But they did a great job, and I just want to focus that because that's what's the majority of the time, was what's going on in our community, is those kind of good things. So just want to give that an acknowledgement.
Jaya.
Yeah, I think struggling a little bit of what to even say. The last few weeks have been a lot, and just want to echo kind of what Grace was saying and what Chris was saying, actually what everybody has said so far of all the good that's happening in our community, but unfortunately that we are seeing that hate pop up here at home too. And I agree with James that it has no place in our community. And I think in order for us to ensure that we are taking the necessary steps, I do think that it's beyond just making a gesture to put in writing that we're reaffirming our commitment to our human rights ordinance, to our commitment to being a sanctuary city, to making sure that we are respecting folks of all genders, to making sure that we are respecting folks of all races, of all religions, all documentation status. I know I've said this before, but it's not just the citizens of Urbana who we serve, it's the residents of Urbana, regardless of citizenship status. So Grace, I appreciate you raising that and would be happy to work on something with you.
Any other comments? I did want to take this opportunity to update you on last week in particular. We were slammed with many different orders coming out of the White House. Probably the one that hit all of us hardest here in this community was the imminent freeze on federal funding. It affected everybody in this community, every single person, even though they claimed that it wouldn't, it would have affected. Anyway, last Tuesday, the OMB announced the freeze on federal funding. We were very quickly in touch with Representative Budzinski's office, her legislative director, as well as the district director. And we also had a Zoom call with Deputy Governor Andy Minar. He was taking the lead on the response from the governor's office, both at the state and federal level. The question to us was, pull together as quickly as you can a list of the federal grants that you have now, that are in your budget now, that are in the pipeline, so we can start to compile a list district-wide, statewide, in terms of the impact of this freeze. So that's what we did. We got that into them. For the city of Urbana, we're looking at programs like the home funds, the home ARP funds, CDBG, all of those things provide housing and you know, some of the basic human needs of the people in our community. And then we have our infrastructure grants. Probably the biggest one in the pipeline, of course, is the recently announced RAISE grant for Florida Avenue. So total impact on our current budget, federal funding is about $7.4 million. Next year, if the RAISE grant is included in our budget, it will be close to $18 million. So this is significant and it's severe in terms of our local impact. Anyway, every organization who receives funding directly or indirectly from the federal government is doing the same, and at this point there are still way more questions than answers. Luckily, there's a pause on this freeze, but I don't expect it to, it's going to come back in some form or another. They'll probably just be more surgical. Anyway, that is what we are at now. I also believe we need kind of need to go back into COVID response mode with a countywide emergency response, getting together with our community partners and making sure that we're addressing the most important needs and prioritizing those needs first. I also wanted to give you an update, since it's been 2 weeks since we met, in terms of the investigation into the fatal hit and run on University Avenue that happened on January 20th. There was an arrest in that, an individual who is a Guatemalan citizen. He was taken into custody in Texas. He will be returned to Champaign County. He has been charged with several serious charges, including reckless homicide, aggravated driving under the influence, and I would ask for a couple more minutes to just finish. That's all right with you guys.
I would say not necessary. I don't know if we want to vote.
I move we extend.
I move we extend for 2 minutes.
Second. Thank you. That's all I need. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Reckless homicide and leaving the scene of a personal injury. Several detectives here on our staff, Paige Bennett and Corey Pankow, have taken the lead on this with Lieutenant Corey Coker and Lieutenant Brian Hoff, who was the first firefighter on the scene, chief medical responder. We extend our thanks to the University of Illinois Police Department for supplying a drone to take photos and video of the crash scene on University Avenue. And we also thank the Champaign Police Department and the Illinois State Police for letting us, bringing their equipment over that helped process the vehicles for evidence. Last week, we also met with the family of one of the victims, and we're scheduled to meet with other family members tomorrow. And that's where we stand on that. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to reports of standing committees. There are none. Committee of the Whole, James Quisenberry.
And may I, point of order, before you get too far into reading, I would like to pull item A from consent agenda on the municipal aggregate.
Okay, that is your prerogative. So, Committee of the Whole has a long list of items on the consent agenda, except for A. I'm going to go ahead and breeze over them. Resolution number 2025-01-010R, a resolution approving authorizing the execution of a grant agreement for a fiscal year 23 Safe Streets and Roads for All grant between the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission and the City of Urbana, and ordinance number 2025-01-002, an ordinance amending Chapter 9 of the Urbana City Code concerning food licenses, and resolution number 2025-01-009R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with Champaign-Urbana Public Health District to jointly issue health permits and city food handling licenses. Resolution number 2025-01-001R, a resolution approving the authorizing the execution of a sustaining Urbana neighborhood grants agreement with Cunningham Children's Home for fiscal year 2024 through 2025. Resolution number 2025-01-002R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a sustaining Urbana neighborhoods grant agreement for Cunningham Township fiscal year 2024 through 2025. By the way, all of these are going to be related, several of these are going to be related to that execution of a sustaining Urbana neighborhood grants agreement for the upcoming year. So a resolution number 2025-01-003R is the resolution with Sola Gracia Farm for that period. Resolution number 2025-01-004R is a similar agreement with Steam Genius for that period. Resolution number 2025-01-005R is a similar program for Urbana Park District for that period. Resolution number 2025-01-006R is one with Urbana School District 116 for that period. And resolution number 2025-01-007R is the resolution approving and authorizing an execution of an economic development agreement with Champaign County Economic Development Corporation for fiscal year 2020-24-25. And resolution number 2025-01-008R, a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a community partnership agreement with Experience Champaign-Urbana for fiscal year 2024-2025. And finally, resolution number 2025-01-011R, a resolution approving an increase in the number of liquor licenses in the Class R&T 1 designation for Urbana Gardens Restaurant doing business as Maple and Yolk at 810 West Killarney Street in Urbana, Illinois.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Chandra. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey,
Yes.
Councilmember Colasetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes.
All right, under the regular agenda items, the first one would be ordinance number 2025-01-001, an ordinance establishing authority to execute municipal electric aggregation agreements.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by James, seconded by Grace. Is there discussion? Grace?
Thank you. I did just want to say thank you to the council for taking some of my remote input on this and for staff changing some of the language. I think it makes sense to me now. I did have a question if there were a representative from Public Works or if Carol's responsible for knowing everything again. Because Tim asked the question about clarification on trust in the electric broker. I had some email back and forth and I'm still not entirely sure if that's been answered. I'm seeing that the way it's written is it talks about comparing with the Illinois Power Agency. I just lost my page. Just anyone with a, oh, wow. Scott walking in from the back, and I'm trying to find my page still here. Yeah.
Scott Tess has arrived.
Good evening.
Oh, sorry, you're probably walking here in some of the question too. Yeah. People were just like, Scott, get in there. I don't know how it happened. If I was wondering if the question about trust in the electric broker had been answered. I'm losing my page number here, but in those same ABC where it talks about adding renewable energy in the city fee, it talks about comparing that price with, they called it like the Illinois Power Association or something. Is that the third party? Has that already been addressed with that piece as far as trust in the broker?
So tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
We got questions about how much do we trust the broker? Like when our electric broker says, hey, we expect electricity is going to be 10 cents a kilowatt hour, so we go on a deal for 9, but really the market rate ends up being 8.5, so we actually missed out. I think that was how I was understanding the question to be.
So the broker uses a number of sources of information to project what prices are going to be in the near future. They're using market analysis. They're using contacts in the market, contacts within regulators. Can't know it for certain, and that's what we pay them for, is to use that expertise with contacts in the industry and with modeling software and modeling expertise. So there's no certainty, there's no guarantee, but there's also no certainty guarantee the other way, that if we don't go into a contract, that we would get, you know, lower or better prices with the default electricity supply price. We will still retain, or each individual ratepayer will retain the ability to opt out. So if things don't go the way we think that they're going to go, there's still the ability to opt out.
Thank you. And do you know the Illinois Power Authority, that sounds like not the electric broker, right?
Correct.
Is that like a general market index kind
Correct.
of thing?
So the default electricity supply, what people often refer to as the Ameren price, is in fact a state agency, the Illinois Power Authority, that buys big blocks of electricity and pushes it through Ameren and ComEd, the regulated utilities, at no markup. So Ameren and ComEd don't make money on electricity supply, the supply portion of your bill. They don't make money on that, even if that's your electric supplier. They only make money on the transmission and distribution. So, we call it the default electricity supply, or the price to compare. And then also it's generally referred to as the Ameren price.
Thank you. And then if I just, final clarification, it sounds like there's no questions remaining from you or understanding of Tim on information you still needed or wanted from council on that?
No, I think we're satisfied there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks
Absolutely.
for running down on short notice. That was
Absolutely.
magical. Yeah.
Any other comments? Jan?
I might have just missed it, but we talked about maybe setting a time limit on this agreement. Am I missing that, or did it just not go in?
So this authorization would be ongoing. The contract we end up signing for a supply agreement will be 1, 2, 3 years. Those are always time bound.
So I guess I would raise that again, that I would still prefer that this be somewhat time bound, and would like to open that up for discussion.
Alice?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that we should not do it in perpetuity, and I don't know if it makes sense to do it in 3 years. You said 1, 2, or 3, or if there is a better cadence.
What you're describing is the status quo, which is problematic, and which we're proposing to change with the ordinance before you. The status quo is, we get an increasingly short notice when there's going to be a good day to go to market and get a price, and then we have to rush in to council and get an authorization for 2 weeks or a month or whatever, because we can't bring an offer that's only good to the end of the day to the next city council meeting.
Sure, no,
And
I understand that. I guess what I'm saying is that a middle ground there is for a determinate amount of time, we can say, you guys have the go-ahead, and then that some cadence, some year, maybe it's every 3 years, maybe it's every 4, it gets redone. Like, okay, now you need a permission for the next 4 years. I feel like that might satisfy what you're trying to prevent, which is that really timeliness that you have to get a response. But correct me if I'm wrong.
It may occur that the sequence of whatever you decide will be adequate for the next sequence of when we go to market, or it may not, because we don't know. So we might sign a 3-year agreement, and you say come back in 2 years, and the best market day is a month before that, or vice versa. So we've had instances where we're in the middle of a contract, and it's like we have to go and get the next one lined up, next month or next week, because that's when the market is going to be best. We have had instances where we've waited to the very bitter end of an existing term, waiting for the market to improve before we lined up the subsidiary, the secondary contract. And so that problem persists, whether we decide today or in the near future to give the mayor or staff 3 years of authority or 4 or 5, that problem may still come up. And it's really, that's the status quo now, I think, is we are coming to city council to authorize for a week or a month or 6 months, and then we're coming back and we're coming back, and we're always playing this timing game.
It is the status quo, except it's a longer time period, right? And I don't know if it makes sense to have it by, 4 years. It would be a timing of when the next mayor will be in. I don't know. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
James?
Yeah, I would like to suggest authorizing this for 2 years. And the reason why I'm suggesting 2 years is we are going to have an election. Council may change. We know we're going to have a new mayor. But as people come on board, that is not the time to run this through a second time. I'm suggesting 2 years. And then when 2 years is up, Scott, all you have to do is come back and make the same case. And maybe it's worked well, and that council, that future council says, okay, we're comfortable with it. We'll authorize it for 4 years, or we'll authorize it in perpetuity. But this is, since we're doing this for the first time, I would like to suggest, I don't know, yeah, I assume I can make an amendment even though I made the motion. I would like to suggest that we amend this to have the authorization expire December 31st, 2027.
I'll second.
The original, since this is a friendly amendment that James made, the second on the original motion, which was Councilmember Wilkin, we'll just need to confirm that that is an acceptable amendment.
Could you repeat the date, please?
December 31st, 2027, essentially 2 years.
I'll change the second to have a discussion about it. Yeah.
Jan?
What's the term of our current agreement?
The current agreement goes through June of this year.
June of this year. Okay, thank you.
Sharice, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I understand what James's thing is with the 31st and so on and so forth, but I was thinking until the next fiscal year, mainly because of the fact that that is a busy time, and it is also a time when often not just city council but staff is also out of the office. They do, everybody does their holiday stuff during that time, and the 31st is New Year's Eve, and it could be a problem trying to gather that information or authority or whatever during a time when the not just the council but the city may also be kind of in doing a relaxation kind of thing for the holidays. So I would just think that we would try to do it on around our fiscal year, the end of our fiscal year.
Okay, James.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, Sharice. The reason why I wanted to avoid the fiscal year is because there's a lot of other things that are going on at the turn of the fiscal year. I'd point out that just because it ends at that point in time doesn't mean the reauthorization or the next authorization couldn't happen 2 or 3 months before it expires. I mean, the next council could certainly have the power to do that before the whatever limit we put on here ends. So I don't think they have to be worrying about it over New Year's Eve. I think we can have a plan that deals with it in November or October.
Grace?
Oh, okay, I understand that, but at the same time, I'm also thinking in terms of we don't know what could happen. So, I would probably be more in favor of something like this if it was before November or at the end of January. And I say that because there's a lot of different reasons, other also than the holiday time, weather conditions, and so on and so forth. that can cause problems. If I'm just trying to think in terms of worst case scenario, and we never know when that's going to happen. There's no way to predict that type of issue, which is why I just said fiscal year. I don't know, maybe I'm not articulating this correctly.
I think,
but
I think you wanted the
anybody else
fiscal year.
wanna-
Yeah, we have other council members who wish to weigh in here.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think some things to clarify here that I think, just make sure we're on the understanding that this isn't for any particular contracts, but authorizing to enter into contracts. It seems like currently in the city code, it says that the mayor or their designee is already authorized to execute them according to this plan of operation and governance. Is that what we're changing it to?
That's what we would be
And so we've
changing.
just, this new plan of operation and governance is what we've created right here, right?
So the ordinance, the plan of operations governance has been changed in accordance with the proposed ordinance. If the proposed ordinance is changed, I'll go back and edit the plan of operation and governance accordingly and resubmit it into packet as informational only.
So I think just in that sense, I've looked at this a little bit more like, this is kind of like a guidebook to the city code, right? Like this is the city code that we're talking about, and this is kind of a operational manual for that code piece. So I think under that logic, it also makes sense to me to not have a timepiece. Like a lot of our other city codes that I know of don't really expire, or some of our manuals, they're things that are updated regularly from time to time if there's an issue, or more on like a decade or few decades kind of timeline. So I think that makes sense to me. I can definitely see a reason to be okay with not having a time limit on this, but each contract will have a specific time limit, and we can always change and address it if needed. I think if it is the will of the council to set a date, I'm also okay with that. I think given that, and we appreciate any of your honest input here, that I think what we've been talking about, whatever date we set, say, you know, the current motion is December 31st, 2027, and knowing that we would hopefully do it ahead of time, so there's no gap in any understanding, and just kind of thinking of it as a renewal date, and just check in and say, hey, is this still what this new council wants to do, or are there any changes to this plan of operation? So I guess does that pose any barrier to you if we set a time limit and renew?
If any expiration on the authorization potentially creates a timing conflict, and there's no way to game out, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, what would not potentially create a timing conflict. And it makes sense that, well, we could set a date certain, and, you could come 2-3 months ahead. The practical challenge is when, there's always something urgent to bring to city council every 2 weeks. And when, leadership is filling out the agenda, the things that really aren't urgent for 3 months, they never get on the agenda 3 months ahead. They only get on the agenda when it's urgent, because there's always stuff that's urgent. And so I can foresee that as a potential. But it may work out. The timing may be such that, a conflict isn't created, but there's going to be the possibility.
Mary Alice.
So just looking at this ordinance, Grace, and I think that's what you were saying, is the ordinance specifies, a sentence, right, within a specific section, and that's the piece that is in perpetuity, and that's part of the ordinance and the code. It's not part of the manual of operation, so to speak. So I feel like that the conversation is more about that sentence saying, we'll have this authority up until date X, is what that would say, after which can be renewed, or by resolution, ordinance, what have you. Is that correct, Scott?
So what's before you is changing city code, the ordinance.
Right.
And I think this is what you're saying. And the proposal as we started tonight was a durable authorization to execute contracts. The plan of operation and governance is always going to be subordinate to council ordinance or codes and ordinance. And so if you change the ordinance, we would subsequently change the plan of operation and governance to reflect that. Now, the plan could go into more detail, and as it does, and be updated from time to time, more operational detail than the city code goes into, and get updated and disclosed from time to time.
Any other comments? So we have an amendment to have the authorization expire on December 31st, 2027.
So it was a friendly amendment. So the motion on the floor is to approve ordinance 2025-01-001 as amended, because it was a friendly amendment. So
Right.
it's approving it and amending.
Correct. I was just clarifying for the public. Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote?
Ask for clarification on,
Yes.
I guess also a second, this is on both of us, but where exactly, because as Mary Alice mentioned, are we putting that in the city code amended language or somewhere in the operational document? Where would you propose exactly putting that?
The city code.
And so saying that the mayor designee shall authorize and execute electric supply agreements and renewable energy credit agreements in accordance with the plan of operation and governments until December 31st, 2027. Thanks.
Yeah, we do need to vote on it, but any other questions? We're voting on the ordinance as amended.
Yeah,
with the
point of
new
order.
date.
I believe that since I made the motion and I also made the amendment and Grace approved the second, the clerk is treating it as the main motion, that it was a restatement of the original motion, right? So we're not going to vote twice. We're only going to vote once.
Could we,
Everybody's clear.
if we wanted to, divide the question, or no, since it's amended that way? All right, never mind. I think it's not the end of the world. Hopefully, we'll remember to come back and renew this before that date, is what we'll hope for.
Okay, the ordinance as amended, it's ordinance number 2025-01-001, an ordinance establishing authority to execute municipal electric aggregation agreements. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey?
Yes.
Councilmember Colasetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, next up would be ordinance number 2025-01-003, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 5, omnibus.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Mary Alice. Discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Wu?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey?
Yes.
Councilmember Colasetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes.
All right, next is resolution number 2025-01-012R, a resolution authorizing intervention before the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Mary Alice. Discussion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Wu?
Yes.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Hersey?
Yes.
Councilmember Colasetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Bishop?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, James. There are no reports of special committees, reports of officers. We have the financial forecast for FY 2026 through FY 2030. And Elizabeth Hannon, HR Finance Director, and Don Ho.
So I want to take a quick minute before we launch into that, because Don actually worked for the city up until 2020 for about 5 years, and some of you were on the council at that time and had the opportunity to meet him, but some of you have not. So Don returned to us in November, happily for me. And he has degrees in both econ and finance, and he's done an excellent job working on the budget with us, so I'm very happy to have him back. So this was alluded to earlier, but I just want to make a note that this is the 11th year I've worked on the city's financial forecast here in Urbana. I've done other ones in another place. But this is perhaps, for some of the reasons that were mentioned earlier, one of the most difficult that I have ever worked on. So we were actually, as we were getting ready to finalize this document last week, things were happening, and it made it very difficult. And in fact, since we published the packet, there have been more things that we're trying to assess the impact of. So I just want to kind of put that out there. We're going to spend a lot more time today talking about risk than we normally would, because that's kind of a defining feature of this year's forecast. So obviously, the new administration in Washington, D.C. has made things challenging. The level of uncertainty here is really unprecedented. So we do this every year, and it's the first step in our annual budget process. Our focus is really on the general operating fund, which is where we pay for most of our basic city services, so most of police and fire, most public works services. And we use this to get a high-level view of our financial condition and make decisions about the budget process. I can't actually predict the future, and neither can Dawn, so we're not going to be precisely accurate, and particularly this year, we may be less accurate than usual. So we talk about this every year. There's risk in every forecast, and we try to produce a likely scenario that we think gives you a picture of the most probable outcome, and we generally plan around the likely scenario. And then we monitor on an ongoing basis to see if things are improving or deteriorating. So currently, the level of risk is higher than in recent years, and there's uncertainty both at state and federal levels. So we've talked about potential changes in state and federal policies, regulations, and funding. I don't think those should be underestimated. A number of us spent a significant amount of time over the past week talking about the possible implications of losing federal funding that we depend on to deliver important services to our residents and also to pay for certain capital improvements. And so we're going to have to monitor that very closely. So in just the last week, grants and loans across multiple programs and agencies were paused. Then about a day and a half later, I think, the pause was rescinded. Then one specific agency, the Department of Transportation, which recently awarded us the $10 million RAISE grant for Florida Avenue, published an order specifically prioritizing projects based on new criteria. And those criteria are rather concerning. So those include requiring grant recipients to assist or coordinate with ICE on detentions. They include prioritizing projects based on marriage and birth rates. Yeah, there's some very concerning language in there, and I'm not going to go into great detail on that. We also saw over the weekend the president announced tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. And then today we heard that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico were going to be delayed for 1 month. So at this point, we only have tariffs on China. However, he also made some statements about tariffs on EU countries as well. So it's been it's been rather startling. It's been very challenging to keep up even with what's happening, and I think we can expect more of the same. So at the state level, just a reminder, because we've all been distracted by what's going on at the federal level, there are continuing efforts to roll back Tier 2 pensions, and that potentially affects retirement systems all across the state. So for us, we have police and fire pensions, as well as IMRF pensions could potentially be part of that. There is still no legislated appropriation for income tax. And so our funds run through something called the local government distributive fund. It used to be that 10% of all income tax revenue went into the LGDF to be shared with local governments. That's no longer the case. As the income tax was increased, the percentage was decreased. Now it's at 6 point something. There is a piece of legislation out there that would increase that to 10% and make it permanent, but if that does not happen, there's still a risk that funds could be diverted from local governments back to the state, and particularly because they're also going to be suffering some of the consequences of things that happen at the federal level. I think it perhaps makes it more likely that that could happen. And let's not forget that periodically we see efforts to put property tax caps on home rule municipalities. Now, while we have voluntarily capped our tax rate, we've maintained the same tax rate for a number of years. That could be very concerning if we're trying to replace lost revenue from the federal government. So I'm going to give it to Dawn to talk a little bit about specifics of the forecast now.
So before I start, I would like to say that I'm happy to be back here, and I'm excited to be working with all of you. So on economic outlook, I want to start by noting again that we're facing a high degree of uncertainty in our economic outlook. There are just several factors in play, as Elizabeth just mentioned, all of which make it very challenging to predict future revenues and expenses. In terms of this forecast, we rely heavily on the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank survey of economic forecaster for long-term projections. And so based on the data, we have some positive indicators. The first one is that a near-term recession is not likely. And the second one is inflation is easing and expected to stabilize over time, reducing financial pressure on households and businesses. And long-term inflation is projected at 2.3%, and that will match our historical trends and suggesting a return to a more predictable economic conditions. On the other hand, we have multiple negative indicators, but the first one, the one that we know for sure that's happening is the elimination of the groceries tax in January 2026, and that will reduce our revenue by $1 million. And despite all of these improvements, it remains critical for the city to maintain reserves in accordance with our current financial policies, because this approach will make sure that we have some flexibility in responding to emergencies or unexpected economic downturns, especially with the new administration and potential policy shifts that could impact multiple revenue sources. So there are some key assumptions that we use for the forecast. Based on our current assumptions, the population count is projected to reach 41,000. an increase from the current census figure of 38,336. And the special census were completed in late 2014, early 2024, early 2025, and we expect to receive the official result in the coming months. And we also have some one-time funding that was reserved for capital improvement projects and for the community engagement team. And we don't have any new recurring expenditures built into the current forecast. So for the city, we use two main indicators to determine our fiscal health. And the first one is the recurring expenditures as a percentage of recurring revenues. And this indicate the ability to sustain expenditures for programs and services over the long term and make sure that the city maintains a balance and does not make long-term commitments for which funding may not be available in the future. And the city current policy is budgeting recurring expenditures not more than 98.5% of recurring revenue. And this will create a buffer to absorb moderate variation in revenue without compromising our ongoing services. And example of recurring expenditures such as personnel costs, like salary and benefits, and some example of recurring revenue is sales tax or property tax. And the second indicator that we use is fund balance as a percent of recurring expenditures. And this is a crucial indicator of a good financial health and provide the city with flexibility when making financial decisions that impact the general fund. The current policy is maintaining a fund balance of at least 25% of recurring expenditures, which aims to put the city in a better financial position to deal with unexpected events such as economic downturns or fiscal emergencies. So on this chart, we have recurring revenues and expenditures for the likely scenario. And as you can see, we have recurring revenues that will equal or exceed recurring expenditure through fiscal year 2028. And this tells us that the city will need additional revenues in the future years just to maintain current services. Okay. On this chart here, we can see that the projected growth rate of recurring revenue outpaces the projected growth rate of recurring revenues throughout the forecast period. And unfortunately, there has been a long-term trend for the city of Urbana. And to address the issue, corrective actions such as revenue increases may be needed in the future. And bridging the gap between recurring revenue and expenditure growth would contribute to the city's ability to maintain current levels of services. So this chart illustrates that under the likely scenario, the unassigned fund balance remains relatively stable throughout the forecast period. In the best case scenario, the fund balance shows a modest increase over time, whereas in the worst case scenario, it decreases significantly. The worst case outcome is considerably more severe than the likely scenario, with the gap between best and worst outcomes being roughly twice as large. And here are some of the key assumptions in the worst case scenario that we put into the projections. So in the worst case scenario, we have tier 2 pensions are eliminated and inflation is extremely high and revenues underperformed significantly. A few slides ago, we discussed the two primary measures for the city's fiscal health. And one of those measures is the fund balance as a percentage of recurring expenditures. So under the likely scenario, the city is projected to remain above the current policy goal for several years without requiring significant budget adjustments. This gives us some flexibility and indicates no immediate action is necessary. We also maintain an assigned cash balance, which includes funds reserved for capital projects and the community engagement team. And we also gonna issue some, and we have discussed this, we're gonna, is this, you wanna mention this or?
Yeah, so we have assumed for purposes of the forecast that when we pay the incentive for the hotel project, that will be a loan from the general fund balance, and we'll have to talk about that more in the future. There are other options, but one of the issues is that we are unable to issue tax-exempt debt for that purpose because of some of the specific terms in the development agreement.
And in the likely scenario, apart from a minor variance at the end of fiscal year 25, the fund balance is expected to stay at or above the fund balance goal through the end of fiscal year 2029. And it's not an immediate concern right now because the further we look into the future, the less accurate the forecast becomes.
So in terms of strategy, we recommend maintaining the current level of services. There almost certainly is not funding available without new revenues to be able to add new programs and services. We have begun and we will continue to begin to prepare for potential reductions in federal funding, since it seems almost certain that that is coming. That is still taking shape very much. I do not have the answers now. But we should be planning for revenue increases, and we have had several discussions about that over the years, identifying alternatives. And we should continue to focus on economic development as a priority because we know that can continue to drive revenue growth for the city. So again, we have this gap between recurring revenues and expenditures, continuing to evaluate for the revenue increases. I'm just going to give you a sample of some of the options that we have previously discussed, just as ideas. We've talked about a cloud tax, a tax on streaming services, which several municipalities in Illinois have implemented. We think that could generate about $300,000 a year on a 5% tax. When the state eliminated the grocery tax from the state tax, they did offer the option of having a home rule grocery tax. And that could generate up to $1 million. We are also 0.5% lower than our nearest neighbor in terms of our food and beverage tax rate currently. So if we were to increase that to 2.5% to match, that would generate about $500,000 a year. And there are, as you know, we had a fairly long list of different options that could be considered, but those are some of the ones that are more likely to produce significant amount of revenues. So again, we think the efforts to reduce federal funding are going to continue. We think Urbana and the state of Illinois are probably in the crosshairs of those efforts, unfortunately. It would not be possible for us, even if there were no new programs or services in the budget, to absorb the cost of the program services and projects that are funded through federal funds. There's no way that can happen. Probably even if we did all of the new revenues that I just mentioned, we could not do that. So we probably have some tough decisions ahead. So for now, we really need to prioritize financial stability, because the more we maintain our financial stability, the more prepared we are to deal with that. I still have questions about the timing of how that's going to happen. I mean, there was already an effort to it felt like clawback money that had already been awarded to cities. I don't know clearly that that's going to be successful, but even if that's not successful, in the next round of budgeting, that funding is probably going to at least begin to disappear. And that's very unfortunate, because all of this has very negative impacts on our community, on our residents, and it will put the city council in a difficult position, because if we need to raise revenue, that also affects our residents. So again, this is all very unprecedented. We need to prepare for a very unpredictable environment ahead, and we will do our very best to kind of keep up with what's happening and to assess the impact. I wish I had a more clear answer for you, but this is as unclear as it has ever been. I'm happy to answer questions.
James.
Thank you. Thank you for looking into the crystal ball, even though it's a little bit cloudy. I got several things I want probably short answers to. First is, you talked about the worst case scenario, the bar that nobody liked that went below zero. You mentioned Tier 2 being eliminated as part of that projection. What does that look like? When you say Tier 2 is eliminated, how do you plan for that? Does that mean that you're planning for everyone you have to contribute as if everyone's Tier 1 again? Or do you have to find a different program for retirement for those individuals? What's that mean?
So essentially, the understanding I have of the legislation that has been proposed is that basically every one of our Tier 2 pensioners, that's generally everybody that's been, that came into the pension system after sometime in 2011, I can't remember if it's January 1 or July 1, all of those employees would immediately, I believe, become Tier 1, and they would receive Tier 1 benefits. So that immediately creates this huge unfunded liability for all the time that we have been funding them as if they were Tier 2. But then it also long-term increases our pension contribution for the higher level of benefits as well.
Yeah, catch up for all of those for 14 years and then paying more. So it's just a reflection of how much more expensive Tier 1 is compared to Tier 2 for the city.
Correct.
Okay. Then you mentioned that we don't have an option of issuing tax-exempt bonds for the hotel situation. Is that we can't issue bonds, period, or is it the tax-exempt component that's restricted because of the development agreement?
So it's the tax-exempt component that's restricted because of the development agreement. We would have the option to issue taxable debt. If we want to do that, we'd probably have a timing issue just because of the limit on bank qualified bonds of 10 million in a calendar year. So we might have to bridge a little timing gap.
And they wouldn't be as attractive to investors, so they would cost more.
Correct. We're going to pay a significantly higher rate of interest.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. And then in these projections, I'm just curious how much of this reflects what we expect H-Mart to generate from a sales standpoint, and when will we have some idea as to how we project that is close to what's actually going to happen?
So we're not allowed to share specific information about specific retails and their sales tax, but I will say H-Mart is generating grocery tax revenue. Grocery tax is going away on January 1, 2026.
Okay, so that's all they're contributing at this point.
As far as I know, we have not seen any results yet. We don't have any data from the state
Okay.
yet, but as far as I know, it's going to be primarily grocery tax. There's probably some food and beverage in there for the food court, but
Okay. And then, so it's really popular, but it's not going to help us in a great way, the way things stand right now.
well, I think it'll help us as a draw to the downtown, but we won't get grocery tax revenue.
Okay. All right. And then I guess under the options that you listed, I didn't see anything with regard to, we have this challenge that while it's great that people are switching to electric vehicles, they are not contributing to the gas tax in the state primarily. Are you seeing any signs of there either being a state or other municipalities taking on the impact? I mean, EVs still have impact on the roads, so we still need a way to have them contribute to maintaining the roads. What are the options there?
So we didn't look at that specifically as part of this forecast because the focus is general fund, and our
Okay.
motor fuel tax revenues are set aside in a separate fund for transportation improvements. But we have talked about the possibility of, something like a wheel tax, and which some of the Chicago suburbs do. That's probably like an annual tax on each vehicle based usually on the gross vehicle weight would be an option.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris, and then Mary Alice.
Thank you again, Elizabeth and Don. It is a difficult time, isn't it? I understand you made it clear that things that are federally funded are in jeopardy right now. But I thought I also heard you say in the forecast that it would be best that there be no new programs or no new expenditures going forward here locally with our money. Did I hear that right, or am I making a mistake?
So I think perhaps I wasn't clear about that. So what I was saying is in terms of next year's budget, we shouldn't plan on loading up on new programs and services, and partly that's because we think we'll have to find money to sustain some of those federal programs for which we won't have federal money.
Yeah, thank you.
Mary Alice.
It's a fun time to be in finance, right? So have you had conversations with other home rule municipalities in terms of the grocery tax, the 1%? Do you know of other municipalities who are talking about that?
I'm sure some will. I'm not aware of any specifically.
Okay, all right. And I know that we used to have like a fee for cable, and now that everybody's kind of moving away from cable, going to cloud services, do you know how much we actually get from the cable still?
Honestly, I'd have to look it up. That's buried in the details somewhere. We still do have a cable franchise fee, and but
I'm just wondering if the 300 that you project for the cloud service would bring us back to where we were when.
yeah, we can look into that.
I'm just curious.
I don't
It's a
know
small
off the
thing.
top of my head, but that's a good question.
And then my last question was with, you had mentioned that there were going to be new criteria for our DOT and for the DOT grants, Department of Transportation. Can you send those to City Council so that we can see that?
I'm sure that we can share that.
We'll share the order.
Thank you.
It's bizarre, to say the least. To the grocery tax, the Illinois Municipal League has prepared a template for an ordinance for home rule communities to pass. So that's been prepared by them. And I know Champaign, when we received word of the grocery tax elimination, they chose not to renew the grocery tax, but they increased the food and beverage tax, sales tax. So communities are approaching things in different ways. But we do have a template, or you will have a template if you do choose to continue the grocery tax. Grace.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this initial presentation. I love graphs. Thanks for the nice, colorful graphs. I appreciate that you said we'd have further discussion because I think there's a lot of initial thoughts and not as much time tonight. Overall, I support taxing more luxury items whenever possible rather than essentials for those especially struggling more financially. I guess my question was if we had an idea of when we would have some of those further discussions. I mean, I know sometime between now and budget, but if there was any particular time we were looping back on this.
So I guess I wasn't trying to indicate that we'd have further discussion specifically about the forecast because we're launching into the budget process almost right away. There's a lot of internal work that still needs to happen. I guess I think what I was talking about was in terms of the debt for the hotel and how we would finance the development contribution. But if there's something specific you would like to discuss, I'm sure we can make a time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of it will be included in those specifics and the overall budget stuff, so thank you.
Any other questions for Elizabeth?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Sharice.
Elizabeth, is there any way, or just based on like the chaotic stuff that's been going on the past couple of weeks, if we were to lose certain funding, do you have a close number of how much that would affect our general fund and how much we would actually lose regarding that?
So
like if we were to lose them.
Yeah, so I mean, so it's not really going to directly affect the general fund because most of our grant money goes into the CD grant fund, but it's home and CDBG are particularly concerning. And if we were to try to replace that, so we have, and I don't have it in front of me, but we have probably several $1 million in home and we have probably several $1 million in home and CDBG funds that have been awarded to us that have not been drawn yet. Plus, there's the future allocations that we might not receive. So we're talking millions of dollars, certainly.
Like 10 million, 20 million. That's, like I said, rough estimate would satisfy me right at this moment because I understand the unpredictability of persons.
So for those programs, for those programs, we're probably talking about a couple $1 million a year, perhaps. But that's on an ongoing basis. That's every year we depend on those funds, which is different than, for example, the RAISE grant for Florida Avenue, which is $10 million. It's a lot of money, but if we don't get the grant, we just won't do that improvement. And that's a vastly different proposition.
And did I hear you say that their transportation grant depends upon birth rate? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I believe we'll send out the DOT order, but they have one of the things that they said in that order is that they're going to prioritize funding for communities with higher than average birth rates and higher than average marriage rates. It was crystal clear.
They also indicated they would prioritize communities that would prohibit mandatory vaccinations with no specificity on what kinds of vaccinations, mandatory masking, and of course local collaboration with federal enforcement of immigration policy. So it was pretty severe.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining what I thought I heard.
You didn't hear wrong. That's what it says, and I can send it tomorrow to you.
Okay, yes, I really would like to see that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mostly just want to say thank you. I can't even imagine trying to prepare this, especially with last week's news. And also just to reinforce that some of those funds you're talking about are what we use to serve the most vulnerable members of our community. I think it's important that we explicitly state that, especially as we're trying to stand on our values as a city, that those are also the same values that are going to make us a target. And so we need to be brave in this moment, but we also have to think about how are we going to continue to protect the most vulnerable members of our community if and when federal funding goes away. I think it's just a matter of how much.
Any other questions? Chris?
One quick one. Elizabeth, the money that's already been awarded, I know that Braden often mentions that the home and CDBG funds are sometimes, they're not used and they get carried over a year. Whatever's been granted to us, we get to still keep what's already been granted to us, right?
I would not count on it.
Really?
So, for example, the ARPA funds were dispersed to us all at once in the beginning. They'd have a hard time getting that back. Sorry, over my dead body. But home and CDBG, as an example, we have an annual amount that we're allocated, but we don't actually receive those funds until we spend. And so that's why in the budget you'll see that the CD grant fund often shows a deficit of a few $100,000. That's because we have to spend the money and then we prepare a drawdown request and then we receive the funds after it's been spent. So I hate to think that the federal government would find a way to claw that back, but I'm not gonna say that it's not gonna happen.
Also included in the federal funds are some of the funds for the safer firefighter positions that are currently funded through federal dollars. Okay. I think that's enough uncertain news for this moment. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. We have one last item of business on this agenda, and that is the appointment of Stuart Burlacher to the Urbana Tree Commission. Council has been provided with his background, but he's a resident of Urbana for 39 years, a professor emeritus of entomology at the U of I. He remains active in academia. He conducts research on insect adaptation. He researches the historical presence of Abraham Lincoln in Urbana and the history of the Big Grove. He's got a PhD in zoology. He has loved trees, to quote him, since I was a child, growing up in a forest remnant on the city limits of Houston, Texas. So he has served previously on the Tree Commission years ago and has applied again to serve, and there is a vacancy. So I'm recommending appointment of Stuart Burlacher for a term ending June 30th, 2028.
I am pleased to make that motion for my former Cub Scout leader, for Stuart Burlacher, for the Urbana Tree Commission, term ending June 30th, 2028.
And I'm pleased to make a second because he got my son interested in entomology, so which is now his career he's pursuing.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. We welcome Stuart back to the Tree Commission. Excuse me. No further business before the City Council. This meeting is adjourned and we'll move immediately.
Can we take a 5-minute recess between meetings?
Yes, we may.
Thank you.
5-minute recess, and then we'll move to the Committee of the Whole meeting.